Remembering back to An Inconvenient Truth, I think there was one statement that Al Gore made, and it was something to the effect that experiencing our weather now is like walking through the book of Revelations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Climate Emergency Forum. Today on tap, wicked weather weirding, taken as an inspiration from the Bard. Something wicked this way comes. And what is that? Well, I think the wickedness that we are seeing in the air is none other than climate change. And it's really difficult. It actually takes a lot of effort for people to deny the reality of climate change these days. Well, you know, those deniers, shall we call them, no shade, no hate, but it's a good descriptive. The deniers have been able to poo-poo the idea of the reality of climate change because the effects have not been so drastic. And I will say, I want to clarify that the effects in the United States, the effects in the global north and Europe, people in the global south, as we call it, have been experiencing the effects of climate change for quite some time. But it's been easy for the shall we call it, the dominant powers to deny it. We just simply cannot do that anymore. It's just become way too weird. And I'm speaking and we're speaking in July of 2021, and we've just seen some incredibly torrential storms around the globe, really. It's really terribly sad to see what's happened in Germany, Brussels. I mean, the flooding, the loss of life is incredible. But sadly, this is not surprising. And please bear in mind that these cities and towns have been around for hundreds of years. So yes, this is new. This is not something that's been seen before. And in fact, one of the most dramatic incidents was in China. The fifth largest city in China had tremendous flooding. And it's really scary to note that on their subway, which is a mere 10 years old, there were people who were up to their necks in water. Well, what a frightening idea. I'm talking to you from New York City. We've seen crazy flooding in the subways of New York City, people swimming up to their waists. Now, again, the subways in New York City are over 100 years old. This is a new problem. This was never something that was the norm. And in fact, if it were the norm, the subways, I'd argue, would not have been built the way that they were built. They were built the way they were because weather patterns had been stable for hundreds of years. No longer is that the case. Well, this is posing tremendous, tremendous difficulties. Now, I've mentioned in the past this notion of climate migration. Well, this is not something that's just coming from other countries. We're going to see it more and more in a home near you, okay? More and more in a place right next to you. And I guarantee you that the Metropolitan Transit Agency here in New York City is going to start looking quite seriously on how to mitigate this and what do we do with the future of the subways? Well, maybe there is no future. Maybe we're going to have to go back to trolleys and trams, above surface transportation. But whatever it is, it's going to have to be done swiftly because the major cities of the world, not just the nation, the world, rely upon mass transit. And largely this transit is subsurface, underground. And of course, the climate relies on mass transit because if we have people who are too afraid to go underground in the subways, that they may be stuck in a flash flood. And as I've seen here in New York City, more and more people taking to combustion engines to get to and from work instead of the subway. Well, we're just going to have more and more feedback effects. Well, what does this mean? Wickeder weather is coming your way. It's a frightening concept. Perhaps we can mitigate it. And I would like to turn the conversation over to Dr. Peter Carter. Peter, what are your thoughts on this wicked weather events that we've been having?
It's Regina, it's terrifying. This is completely terrifying. If you really take a look globally, which you've introduced, headline, a headline from Business Insider: devastating floods, heat, wildfires on 3 Northern Hemisphere continents at once. I caught the end of an interview with a scientist from the World Meteorological Organization, and he said this intensity and widespreadness and of these severe extreme weather events, the heat and the drought, he said this may have never ever happened before. This may be completely unprecedented. Our planet may not have seen this. I just want to quickly mention 2 recent papers. One paper confirms that heat waves are accelerating worldwide. The basic climate science, this was predictable many decades ago. And that's because global warming is accelerating. Global warming is accelerating because we haven't reduced our emissions. And because global warming is accelerating, obviously extreme heat events are accelerating. This paper's by Perkins Kilpatrick last year. So it's a very valuable scientific paper to confirm, yes, what we're seeing is really happening. The other one I just want to mention quickly is on burning embers. It was published last year by Zommers. And it's very, very interesting to look at because it compares the occurrence and the predictions of various impacts over the years and compares the IPCC assessments. Just suffice it to say that in 2001, the IPCC at the time recognized that extreme weather events were happening. They had increased already, and they thought that they were due to climate change. In the last such assessment with this kind of, it's called burning embers diagram, the IPCC 1.5 degrees C report, much the same, but the temperature threshold at which these extreme weather events become severe, widespread, and well, they're severe and widespread. That's how they describe them. That comes down very, very close to 1 degree C. So we are there, right? We are in an extreme, severe, widespread extreme weather events. Oh, IPCC includes forest fires in extreme events. So that they approach this as one category. And you've probably read that the scientists are saying that, again, they're shocked by this, totally shocked by this. Their computer models didn't predict this, and so they're asking for bigger computer models. We do not need computer models. This was predictable decades ago. And we know for sure that all of these extreme weather events, the heat waves, the droughts, the floods, the fires, are going to increase, and they are going to increase rapidly. This isn't a one-off thing. This is going to repeat. And I've noticed that if you look over the whole planet, because you've already mentioned, they had terrible heat waves in China. They had heat waves in Scandinavia, heat wave up in coastal Siberia. I mean, it's been all over the planet, and they're all unprecedented. And I got the news about the Chinese heat wave because when they were in the heat wave last month, they burnt more coal than they've ever burnt before because of the increased use of air conditioning. Why do we have this terrible heat in the west third, at least, of the United States and North America? It's no big surprise. The warming in this region from the latest NASA GIS maps is up to 5 degrees C. That's just warming. You get the extreme weather events on top of that. We have a massive, massive North Pacific marine heat wave, like nothing like this has ever been seen off the west of the United States. And we're also in, as the scientists have been telling us for years, the southwest of the United States is now in mega drought. That drought is not going to disappear. It's only going to spread. When the next El Nino comes, we've just come out of a cooling La Nina, all hell is going to break out. All hell is going to break out throughout the Northern Hemisphere. My message, we're going to have to prepare like rapidly. There really is no urgency. The urgency is not out there. So there you go.
Well, you said a lot there, Peter. There's so many things that I could touch on. One of the things that's frightening is China having to burn more coal because of more air conditioning, and of course the feedback loop that creates. And you mentioned the drought in the Southwest, and I'm just wondering, and I know that you don't have a magic ball there, but is there a time in the future that you think that it might even actually become uninhabitable?
Oh, definitely. Because you're getting increasing heat in this huge region of the United States, intolerable heat and drought. It's just going to increase until the world decides to put emissions into rapid, immediate decline. All of this is going to increase. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse faster.
Thank you.
It is.
Thank you, Peter. Paul, your thoughts on this weirding weather?
Yes. Remembering back to An Inconvenient Truth, I think there was one statement that Al Gore made, and it was something to the effect that experiencing our weather now is like walking through the book of Revelations, okay, with all of the disasters and consequences of the extreme weather. Recently, I did a CTV, which is Canada's broadcaster, one of Canada's national broadcasters. And I talked about a number of key points. One being that the rise in temperature means that there's more energy in the atmosphere. And the reason why there's more energy in the atmosphere is because you get more evaporation from water surfaces, from lakes, oceans, and rivers, et cetera. That water vapor, H2O, is an invisible gas. It rises up into the atmosphere where it gets colder with elevation, with altitude, so that it condenses into the water droplets on cloud condensation nuclei and forms the clouds. And there's a lot more water vapor. In fact, for every degree Celsius rise in temperature, there's 7% more water vapor that's in the atmosphere. And when that water vapor condenses into the clouds, it releases the latent heat. So the atmosphere is charged with a lot more energy. Meteorologists call it CAPE, C-A-P-E, convective available potential energy. And when people go out and look for storms, they look at the CAPE numbers is one of the key ingredients into massive thunderstorms. And also they look at whether there's a trigger, like whether there's a cold front coming through, which will force the convection. And those things are, the atmosphere is primed now for these much more intense storms. So instead of just getting rainfall, we're getting torrential rainfall. Now, the other big factor, and I've talked about it and others have talked about it, is the storms are guided a lot by the jet streams, and the jet streams have slowed and become much wavier and stuck in place. And meteorologists or weather forecasters, they call it blocking. And so the storms that are laden with a lot more water and energy, so therefore produce torrential rains, they're guided slower across the surface of the earth. So they tend to stay in one region for much longer and produce torrential rains. So we're seeing that all over the world. We're seeing, in Germany, many other countries in Europe, that massive flooding. That was last week. That's old news. This week it's China. China, which Regina mentioned, they actually had 2.5 to 3 feet of rainfall in 3 days. That's almost a year's worth of rainfall. 700 millimeters or 70 centimeters or 0.7 meters if you're metric, but 2.5 to 3 feet. And this is widespread over a wide area. And of course, the water just runs to the low points, and it filled up the subway systems, and many other rivers became swollen, and streets became rivers, and like huge catastrophes. So we're getting more and more and more of this. It doesn't matter where you live. I like to call it the climate casino. In my closing remarks in the CTV interview, where I was asked what's in store for us, what's coming up, and I said, you haven't seen anything yet. And I like to. One of the things I've been toying with lately is looking up all of these famous quotes and modifying them slightly to climate change. So let me say this in closing right now. Ask not what our planet can do for you, but ask what you can do for our planet.
Thank you, Paul. That's a great one. Because it seems to me that throughout human history, and especially since industrialization, we have been looking at the planet as something to do for us, to take from it, to extract. And it's time for us to start looking from a different perspective. And as you suggest, we need to start working for the planet. Our lives depend upon it. I mean, this is no exaggeration. And, I have to tell you, I'm in the East Coast, as I mentioned, and we've had these horrible fires from Oregon, from the West Coast of America. And just the other day, I live by the Hudson, and I like to take a nightly walk. And just a few evenings ago, I was taking a walk, and generally I wear glasses, okay? And I was thinking, my gosh, my glasses are just, I might need new glasses, but I couldn't see clearly. And I texted a friend, I didn't know what was going on. And she's like, no, actually, that's from the fires out west. And the jet stream that you mentioned, Paul, I guess just carried all of that smoke straight over to here. And then I looked, I have an app that measures air quality. And I saw that the PM 2.5 was just through the roof. And I looked around me, and there were people jogging, and it just scared the daylights out of me. And I have to say, I rushed home, I installed my air conditioner, which I almost never do. I try not to. But I have 2 friends within the last 2 weeks who've suffered strokes. And of course, PM 2.5 is very highly correlated with strokes. And I just say to myself, is this some kind of crazy accident? That these 2 people that I know have had strokes, and the smoke from the forest fires are just hovering over us. And I just don't think that it can be. And since you're a doctor, Peter, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Burning fossil fuels today is the most evil criminal activity imaginable. Fossil fuel air pollution is killing 8 million people a year. Every time the research is done, they find that the numbers are higher. It's now up to 8 million a year. So fossil fuels should have been banned years ago. I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's sort of frustrating that we think, or we're told, that we kind of have to wait for climate change to get so severe until the governments are going to say, oh, well, we're going to phase out fossil fuels. No, fossil fuels are killing 8 million people a year already. So that is absolutely so important. And we are in such a grave, grave situation. It is so grave. In just a few years, it is going to be hell on this planet. It really, really is. One perhaps useful thing is that perhaps the Northern Hemisphere, the so-called global North, is going to wake up and see that they are vulnerable. They're being hit hard by our fossil fuel emissions and pollution. People must connect these two big dots. The IPCC, in its 2014 assessment, said that heat waves, extreme heat, will increase in frequency, duration, and severity. So on all of climate science, on all of the aspects of extreme weather events, you really only have to know extreme heat. And like you just asked me, in the southwest of the United States, these regions are going to become regions that nobody is going to want to live there. Nobody is going to want to go to these regions. I've just been doing more drought maps. North America drought map is absolutely horrendous, but it's bad in South America as well. The planet is being transformed by polluting fossil fuel emissions into a place where nobody's going to want to live.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. It's a frightening concept. And when you were just talking about the Southwest being uninhabitable, it brought to mind the folly of so many politicians, business leaders who say that doing anything about climate change, well, first of all, it's fake, but second of all, it's too expensive. It's too expensive to address. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, are we saving anything? Well, first by destroying the planet for all living beings, but we have, I hate to say Las Vegas, but Las Vegas in the Southwest. We have New Mexico. They're like, how much does it cost to lose entire cities and towns and states? I think once again, we're looking at the idea of being penny wise and pound foolish. You know, it's I envision the great oil gushers of Texas that you saw in the movie Giant, and how when it's flowing, right? We're in high cotton, everything's great. But those days are over. Those days are over, and the days of milk and honey are long gone. And it's time for us to face up to this reality, grow up and do something right now. And Paul, I'm wondering if you have any recommendations about what some of the things that we can do. Is it possible?
Yes. So, as far as regions of the planet becoming uninhabitable, we're extremely close right now to that happening. For example, in parts of the Middle East, next to the Gulf of Aden and the other water bodies, because of the when you reach a temperature of 35 degrees Celsius with 100% humidity, this is known as the wet bulb temperature, and your body loses the ability to sweat, to perspire, and that's the main mechanism for removing heat from the body through that phase transition of the sweat liquid to gas as it evaporates on your skin. So definitely, we're very close to places becoming uninhabitable. I often talk about the need for Canada to have the Americans build a wall on our border to stop the hordes of Americans coming up to Canada when the US Southwest becomes uninhabitable through complete lack of rainfall. An attempt at my sayings with using song or popular quotes, you've probably heard, if you are not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Don't just be another brick in the wall. Okay, you have to take action. You have to take a stand, because don't assume somebody else is going to do it. The air pollution of 8 million people dying per year, that's been increasing most years. The trend is up. That's not a stable number, and I think it's actually closer to 9 million in some of the latest research. And it's not all sizes and types of air pollution that they're not all equally bad. Some of the worst ones are the PM 2.5, which are particles less than 2.5 micron in diameter, because when you breathe those in, they can go deep into the lung tissue, the alveoli of the lung, which exchange the oxygen, and where the oxygen goes into the blood and the CO2 comes out of the blood. And I think one of the big factors in stroke is the risk is much higher if there's a lack of oxygen. So, it's probably directly related. Some of the tech that I think will become ubiquitous soon will be incorporating detectors to measure CO2 and the particulate counts, particle counts, and some of the nitrous oxides and ozone harmful things. And those can be incorporated directly into iPhones, well, any smartphones, smartwatches, so wearables. So, people walking along a highway can see the particle count is huge and maybe pick a route through the woods or something nearby. And people indoors can see, well, the CO2 level is too high, so my risk from the virus is too high, is high. Another factor, with causing the extreme weather event, it's not just the atmosphere in turmoil, it's the oceans also. So the ocean currents are slowing, the thermohaline circulation, or the AMOC, Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Those bring a lot of heat over to Europe. So because they're slowing and less heat is going to Europe, we're getting more temperature contrast there as the land is heating more than the oceans, and those temperature differences are causing these disruptions in the jet streams there. And Europe is, with all of the floods, and as bad as they are, they're going to get far, 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 far worse.
Thank you, Paul. So, and thank you, Peter, and thank you everyone for joining us today on this Climate Emergency Forum. There's a lot to absorb there. One of the takeaways that I think is really positive is this idea of measuring air quality wherever we are. And I think it's important. As I mentioned, I know 2 people who had strokes in the last 2 weeks. So we're going to have to start really, really taking care of ourselves and our health as the very air we breathe becomes more and more polluted. And sad to say, we're suffering the fate of many other living beings on this planet. And lucky for us, we're able to take measures that unfortunately they are not. So let's take those measures. And one of the things that you can also do that's positive is go ahead and like this video if you learned something new. And if you did, share it with a friend. Maybe it can help them out as well. And go ahead and click that subscribe button as well. We want to make sure that you're aware of every video that comes out so we can share the latest information with you as we share it with each other. So once again, thank you. Take care from the Climate Emergency Forum.